G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds you all well. Today I just wanted to create a short video just around cropping to specific sizes and resolutions. Now this is something that I have had requests from clients on a number of occasions, commercial clients, where for example they've had an image that's going into a website or a specific space and they need the image to fit, but they don't know how to resize or change the aspect ratio or resolution themselves. So they've often just flicked me an email and asked, can you resize this image to this specific size and resolution for us? Now luckily with Photoshop it is a very quick and easy process to be able to do, and it is often something that you will do if you're doing any level of design work. For example, if you're creating a wedding album or some sort of book or magazine or something that requires images to be a part of something else, so it might be images and text or images and some sort of graphics or logos, then sometimes you need to change the size and resolution of those images. And of course it may even be that you're just wanting to print to a particular size and the lab that you're using requests your images to be resized and ready to go before you send them. So that's another really common scenario. The lab that I used to use, fantastic lab for around 10 years, they would offer people slightly cheaper prices if their images were already sized correctly when they were sent in, because it reduced their workflow and they were able to simply send the image to print without having to do any specific sizing themselves. Now that's generally for high volume printing, but it certainly is an example of where knowing how to specifically size the shape and resolution of your images can be super helpful and sometimes make things a little bit more cost effective as well, which is never a bad thing. Okay, so the way that we're going to be doing this today is through Photoshop, and we're going to be using the crop tool, which I'll just hover over there. You can see crop tool. It's got a little sort of crop shape and a little video that shows you how it works. And of course the shortcut is C for Charlie, so that's a great way to go. Now you can see when I've selected that crop tool, we've immediately around the image has changed, and you can see that there's an option now to click and drag that crop tool in any way that you want and any shape, which basically demonstrates the first method of how to crop your image to a specific shape. Now this is a bit of a freehand type method, but it allows you to crop the image in a very specific way and quite freely as well, obviously, because as I mentioned, it's a bit of a freehand way of doing it. So we can literally crop that image in any way that we want. However, it doesn't allow us to necessarily enter in a specific dimension or shape. So while it's a great and easy way to crop your image, it doesn't give you that specific resolution and or aspect ratio that you may need to have with your images. So we're just going to hit the stop button there, and we're going to be back to our original shaped image. Now up on the top left hand corner here you can see that we have a couple of little drop down boxes, or one drop down box that's most relevant for today's video, and that says ratio at the moment. So if I just click on that drop down, you can see that the top two options are ratio and width and height resolution, and these are the two tools, as well as some other ones in here as well, that we're going to be using. Now if we look at ratio and then we go down to a little bit further in that drop down box, you can see we've got original ratio, which means that it's going to keep it to that original aspect ratio. So you can see I can't actually change the shape, I can just change the position of the crop. So that's handy if you want to keep the shape the same, but you want to use your crop tool in a way that allows you to remove part of the image. So we can obviously resize that and then move the image around, but we're still maintaining that original ratio, which in this case is 2:3. All right, so we're just going to X out of that. So we go back to our original image. Now, if we go down to a little bit further, you can see that there's a 1:1 square. So very handy if you want to crop your image to a square shape, which is absolutely really handy, particularly when you think of stuff like Instagram, or if you're doing any design work and that sort of thing, any situation where you want a square image. So that is super handy as well. All right, let's go back to our original again. And we also have 4:5 or 8:10. Now, you probably would recognize the terminology 8:10. So it's a ratio that used to be used for printing. But what it does mean is that you lose a little bit of either side, or you have to crop a little bit of the image if your image is a 2:3 ratio. Now, you can see I've just put 4:5, and it's actually cropped it into a vertical. Which brings up a new point as well. What if we want to maintain a horizontal image? What do we do in this situation? So you can see actually between the 4 and the 5, there's two little arrows there. And if we click that, it's going to swap it around so that we are maintaining a horizontal shape and orientation, I should say, of the image. But you can see, as I mentioned earlier, with 4:5 ratio or 8:10 ratio, it's cropping a little bit on either end. So it just means that if you are going to use that 8:10 or 4:5 ratio, you need to also decide what you want to crop. Now, this is particularly important for landscapes. As you can see, I'm either cropping part of the jetty or I'm cropping part of the city in the distance there. Now, where it's also really important is if you're photographing portraits or weddings or anything that involves people, because you obviously don't want to crop off their heads or their hands or their feet. You may need to make some decisions around how you're cropping and what you're willing to let go of. So this is particularly important to consider. All right, so as I said, with 4:5 or 8:10 ratio, you are losing a few pixels on either side there, and you need to decide which way you want to go. Now, back to what I was mentioning before as well with those two little arrows, it also means that if you want to crop in a vertical fashion for a horizontal image or vice versa, that's how you do it. So if you're working with ratios, you can just hit those little arrows and it will swap around the crop orientation, which is super handy to know. All right, let's go back to ratio, and if we go down, you can see that the option there is 2:3 or 4:6, which is happens to be the same as the original ratio, and also 16:9. Now, where 16:9 is particularly handy is if you are putting images into some sort of video. So generally, video ratio is 16:9, and you can see that it's also classed as widescreen, which it gives a little bit more of a panoramic feel, which you can see there. But it means that you can pre-crop your images before you pop them into a video, and they will fit perfectly. So that's super handy. Otherwise, what you'll find is you might find a couple of black bars on either side of the image, which may not necessarily work for the look and feel of your video. So pre-cropping into 16:9 is a good way to go, and it means that the shape of your images will match the shape of general video, which is, as I mentioned, widescreen or 16:9. All right. That's excellent. That's the sort of preloaded ratios that are in there. You can also see that we've also got some measurements as well. So 4:5 at 300 ppi, 8.5 by 11 at 300 ppi, 1024 by 768 at 92 ppi. These are just presets for width and height resolution, which also obviously gives us a ratio as well, or a shape. So for example, 4:5 inch at 300 ppi, you can see there we've got now a 4:5 inch image at 300 pixels per inch, and we can of course, as we did before, swap that positioning of that ratio around as well so that it's horizontal and not vertical. All right. So what we also have the option to do is to select a specific width and height and resolution. So a scenario that I had not that long ago was a client was having an image or having a new website built, and they needed an image to fit specifically on that website. Now, normally the web developers change and resize images that are supplied to them, but in this case they wanted me to do it to make sure that everything was correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in the resolution that they asked for, and it was 1024 by 768. Actually, it wasn't 768, my apologies. It was 568. There we go. So a little bit of a panoramic feel. So it's defaulted to pixels, which you can see there. And they actually asked for it to be 300 dpi. Or pixels per inch. Now, Generally speaking, I've always had website or images requests for websites to be at 72 pixels per inch, but in this case it was 300. It actually doesn't matter. The size of the image is what matters, which is that first set of numbers that we entered, 1024 pixels by 568 pixels. And we just need to click that, and you can see that our image has actually been resized. If we just go up to image and size, we can have a look, and we have 1024 by 568 at 300 pixels per inch. Excellent. All right, we're going to hit OK because that was just an information gathering process. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our original image size, and we're going to get rid of that crop there. So that was an example of a width and height by resolution. So X number of pixels width by X number of pixels height by X number of pixels per inch. All right, so that's a width and a height and a resolution specific sized image. What we're going to do now is another method is we're actually going to select 16:9. So we are cropping to a ratio, but we're not actually removing any pixels. Now, if I just click on that tick and we go up to image size, you can see that we still have the full resolution width. Okay, so that's good to know. What we can do now though is we can go to image size and we can go, well, I would like that image to be 1068 wide. Actually, what we can do now is go to up to image size, and I'm going to place this image, because we've cropped it to a 16:9 ratio, into a 4K video timeline, which means the long edge of the image needs to be 3840 pixels wide. So that's what we're going to enter, 3840 pixels. There we go. And you can see the height has also been changed to 2160, which is what the height is for an Ultra HD video timeline. So you can see we have now cropped to a ratio, and then using image size, we've also changed the pixel dimension. So as with all things Photoshop, there are several ways to achieve an outcome. Let's go back and have a look at that crop tool. We have selected a 16:9 ratio, which you can see we've got a widescreen ratio there. All right, if we go back to the original size and we go up to our ratio, you can see that we have the option to select any ratio that we want, or we can select a ratio here as well. So we can enter in a ratio specific. So it may be 2:5. That's an unusual ratio. You can see it's cropped it vertically, but what we're actually going to do is we're going to go 2:5 again, and then we're going to swap that around so that it's a wide horizontal crop. There we go. So you can see we can enter in a ratio as well, so specific to whatever we want it to be. Then through image size, we can enter in the specific pixel dimensions, either width or height, with that ratio being locked there, but we can still enter in that pixel dimension, width or height if we want to. Remembering also that we can specifically within the crop tool select width, height and resolution as well. So by entering our width, our height and our resolution pixels per inch. So as I mentioned earlier with Photoshop, there are always multiple ways of achieving an outcome. However, using the crop tool does give you flexibility to specify a ratio, a width and a height and a resolution, a shape, anything you want it to be. So this is a great tool to keep in mind if you're doing any design work, whether it's a wedding album or a portrait album or a layout, or if you're wanting to specifically have your images at a definite size for printing as well, which many printers appreciate because it helps to speed up their workflow. As we all know, that's never a bad thing. So the crop tool is very flexible in being able to achieve a specific outcome with the shape and resolution of your images. Hope this video has been helpful. Thanks again for stopping by. As always, any questions in the comments are more than welcome, and we hope to see you again in the future. Take care.